You are watching The World 24/7 on the NDTV network. I'm Parmeshwar Bawa. Let's begin with the top stories you need to know. A report issued by the British government reveals that a post-study visa program, which is dominated by Indian graduates, is helping UK universities recover from financial losses and expand research opportunities. Joe Biden has slapped major new tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles, advanced batteries, solar cells, steel and medical equipment, taking pot shots at Donald Trump along the way as he embraced a strategy that's increasing friction between the world's two largest economies. India has extended $1 million worth humanitarian assistance to Kenya in the wake of devastation caused by floods that have hit the country. An estimated 267 people have died and over 280,000 people have been displaced. A former Indian Army officer who was working as a UN security officer was killed in an Israeli strike on a vehicle marked with UN flags in Rafah in southern Gaza on Monday. Ashwin Ramaswami, the first Gen Z Indian American running for a US state legislature, has raised over $280,000, outraising his incumbent opponent Shawn Still by 22 times in the latest filing period. Well, our big focus. A report issued by the British government reveals that a post-study visa program, which is dominated by Indian graduates, is helping UK universities recover from financial losses and also expanding research opportunities. But what is the graduate route visa? It was introduced back in July 2021 and it allows international students to remain in the UK for up to 2 years, 3 years for PhD graduates after completing their studies. Now, this review conducted by the Independent Migration Advisory Committee, it actually focused on the graduate route visa. The utilization of the graduate route is primarily concentrated among 4 nationalities: India, Nigeria, China, and Pakistan. You know, these top 4 countries actually collectively represent 70% of all graduate visas, with India alone contributing over 40%. In fact, applications to UK universities have dropped because of the visa program uncertainty. But this report clearly says there's no widespread evidence a post-study visa for international students is being abused. This also comes as the Rishi Sunak government has been working on cutting immigration figures and introduced restrictions on bringing dependents, increasing salary requirements, among other measures. To discuss what this review means for Indian students, we have with us Sanam Arora, chairperson of the National Indian Students and Alumni Union from the United Kingdom. Thanks so much, Sanam, for joining us on The World 24/7. How do you see the committee's recommendation to retain the graduate visa route? Many Indian and international students studying in the UK, they actually assert that it is absolutely crucial.
Partially. Firstly, we really welcome the Migration Advisory Committee's recommendations to retain the post-study work visa as is. That is exactly what we had asked of MAC. That's what we had been doing as part of our Fair Visa, Fair Chance campaign. So we absolutely welcome it. We're delighted that the MAC has come out with this conclusion. However, it is really up to the UK government now to decide how it wants to use MAC's recommendations. I will, highlight that there has been a previous instance where the MAC was, not necessarily in favor of the post-study work visa, but the government still went and did it anyway. So, it's absolutely critical that the government now commits urgently to retaining the grad route as is and making no change to it.
In fact, Sanam, the committee has also warned against the use of recruitment agents by universities, which, as we know, often leads to mis-selling of courses and exploitation of students. Is this a challenge for students? And how do you think this issue can be addressed by the UK government?
I think we do. It was actually something that we had recommended to the MAC ourselves, that, there are by and large, recruitment agents are a good part of the sector. They support the sector, but sometimes there can be unscrupulous agents. Every Tom, Dick, and Harry claims to now be an agent, and they can often even sign up to aggregator platforms. And there is enough unscrupulous behavior in the market that has caused us concern in the past. So we very much welcome Mac's recommendations in this regard as well. And I think, universities should, we've recommended multiple times on multiple occasions before on multiple conferences and forums here in the UK that universities should review their arrangements with their agents and make sure that all arrangements are genuinely student-centric.
Right, several UK universities, meanwhile, have also reported a big drop in international applicants. Are such trends likely to continue? And if they are, surely that's not good news for the UK.
Yeah, I think look, there's been so much uncertainty that the sector has been dealing with. First we ran a 7-year-long campaign to bring this graduate route to the UK in the first place. It came in 2019, started being effected a few years after, and we've only just had a little bit of stability. The last year's changes around, dependents and skilled worker salary thresholds, etc., we've already seen like a 40% drop from a lot of universities in the UK, or overall, I think we've seen 40% drop already in the January intake. And partly that is also because of the speculation about what's going to happen to the graduate route. So, and given the fact that, 70% of Indian students have told us that this is their number one requirement, they all love the UK, but this is a critical part of, the post-study work visa that, or the opportunity that the UK offers. My worry is that, yes, we will continue to see a significant decline in the numbers if the graduate route gets taken away, which is why commitment to stability from government urgently is absolutely key. And that's what the MAC has said, right? They've said no change to the graduate route is recommended. And we hope it stays that way.
In fact, Sanam, the National Indian Students and Alumni Union in the UK, which you head, also recommended that international students be delinked from immigration figures. How would you justify this argument?
It's actually a critical question, Risha, because in the UK, we have got something called the net migration targets, and the Conservative parties repeatedly, with all change of governments, have said that they want to bring down net migration to tens of thousands or significantly lower numbers, etc. The problem is that international students currently, as counted as part of those net migration targets, the simple point is, how can a student who is here for a temporary period of time, a time-bound period of time, be counted as an immigrant, right? It makes no logical sense. Sure, there's reasons, for data comparisons internationally, but actually the major comparable international destinations like the United States, they don't count international students as immigrants. They count them in a temporary kind of bucket separately. Why? Because this rhetoric that students are immigrants and they're taking away our jobs or they're taking away our opportunities, like there's lies being spread. For example, things like international students are taking away the places of home students, when the fact is that international students are cross-subsidizing domestic British students. They're cross-subsidizing the world-class research that happens in British universities. So the fact is that if you were to logically do the logical thing, take international students out of this net migration target, i.e. de-link education from immigration, suddenly you'll find that immigration, the genuine picture of immigration, stable long-term immigration, is being more factually reported, more accurately reported. And the international students who the period of time that they're paying extra for healthcare for the NHS, they're paying, the immigration health surcharge, they're paying for everything they're here for, and they're paying X amount more than the average British person. I think there's all sorts of economic figures around this, but this is a sector that contributes more than £40 billion net annual revenue into the British economy.
Well, Sanam, thank you so much for joining us with those insights. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. The other crucial story we're tracking, a former Indian Army officer who was working as a UN security officer was killed in an Israeli strike on a vehicle marked with UN flags in Rafah while he was on his way to a hospital in southern Gaza on Monday. The UN announced that one of its staff members was killed and another injured in the attack on the official vehicle of the global body. But the victim had been identified as Colonel Webhav Anil Kale, who joined the United Nations as a security coordination officer just 2 months ago, as per our informed sources. He had taken premature retirement from the Indian Army in 2022, And this is the first international casualty of the United Nations since the start of the current Gaza war on the 7th of October. Till now, around 190 UN staff members had been killed in Gaza. I must inform you, the UN in its statement did not mention who had fired at the vehicle. In other news, the issue of Khalistani terrorist Gurpatwant Singh Pannu will not affect India-US relationship. This is what the US envoy to India, Eric Garcetti, has told NDTV. Calling the ties the most consequential relationship passing through a historic era, he likened it to a marriage with its inevitable fights and disagreements. Listen in.
The Pannu issue has been a real concern at so many levels. There is an investigation taking place over here, but the question that people ask in India is, given that India has concerns about Khalistanis and supporters of the Khalistan movement in the US, we've had our consulate in San Francisco attacked as well, etc., etc. What is America doing to help us address those concerns on your soil?
Well, in that issue, we take incredibly seriously. I'm a diplomat. An attack on a diplomat is an attack on me, attack on my family. And whether it was the FBI working very closely with Indian law enforcement or local law enforcement in San Francisco, where we saw horrible attacks on the consulates, we take that not only very seriously, but we hope to find the evidence and to be able to hold people accountable. And we deeply appreciate, not just in those moments, but transnational gangs that operate in both of our countries. I would say last year, there's never been a year stronger than that in the coordination and collaboration between our police agencies, our law enforcement agencies together. Separate from that, obviously, is an ongoing criminal case that I can't speak to in great detail, but we also know we should be focusing on what people do when they cross the line, illegal behavior, no matter what the source, there needs to be accountability on that. What people say can be disturbing, but it's what people do that breaks the law.
And you expect that accountability in terms of New Delhi's response? That's what you're...
Absolutely. I think we've made that clear. We've had good collaboration. I would say, this is like an amazing marriage that we have found. Marriages have disagreements, even fights, and how we manage those moments defines the strength of a relationship. But I would say to everybody who said, ooh, this is going to be a hiccup, this is going to be a roadblock, our work every single day at the embassy, every single day at the Ministry of External Affairs, the Indian Embassy in Washington has not slowed down one bit. It continues to accelerate because we want this relationship, we need this relationship, and we have this relationship.
Yeah. Two quick questions. The International Space Station, I follow the space sector very closely.
Yeah.
There will be an Indian on the International Space Station. Could you tell us when? And how is that working? Do we have an idea of, timeline?
So the offer that was made by the president was to put an Indian astronaut on an American mission to go up to the space station this calendar year. And that's still the plan. It's space, so as you know, you never know. Can't guarantee that it happens, but we do expect it to happen. Indian government has indicated who that astronaut is. I'll let them, announce that at the proper time.
You can announce it as well.
No, I'll let them. That's not my prerogative. But we are so excited, and we always talk about this relationship as extending from the seabed to the stars. And that evidence will be seen this year, not just with an astronaut that we're going to help put in space, an Indian astronaut, but also a satellite that we hope gets launched this year, NISAR, which is a collaboration between NASA and ISRO. There is nothing that speaks more about the hopes and aspirations of our people, of our governments, and our relationship than our work together in space.
Ambassador, wonderful speaking to you. Thank you so much for spending some time with us and addressing all these issues. Thank you very much indeed.
It's a great year ahead. Thank you.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Meanwhile, the United States will raise tariffs on electric vehicles, clean energy technologies, computer chips and metals imported from China. This is what the White House has said. And this after the culmination of a years-long review and spirited debate within the administration over the Trump-era duties. Now, this move represents an escalation in the US trade war with China that actually began when former President Donald Trump imposed tariffs on more than $300 billion of Chinese imports back in 2018. The Biden administration is quadrupling the current tariff on EVs to 100% and doubling tariffs on solar components to 50%, as well as sharply increasing duties on steel and batteries.
Today I'm announcing new tariffs in key sectors of the economy that are going to ensure that our workers are not held back by unfair trade practices. They include the thing I'm announcing today, 25% tariff on Chinese steel and aluminum products, and will counter China's overcapacity in these industries. And we're making major investments in clean American steel and aluminum. Clean American steel and aluminum. It's a big deal. Next, a 100% tariff on electric vehicles made in China. People say, wow. Because we're not going to let China flood our market, making it impossible for American auto manufacturers to compete fairly. We're also implementing a 25% tariff on electric vehicle batteries from China and a 25% tariff on critical minerals that make those batteries.
So the US government argues that the higher tariffs will ensure US firms are not undercut by a flood of unfairly underpriced exports from China in areas like electric vehicles, batteries, and vital medical equipment. Let's now go across to Washington, D.C., where Nick Harper joins us with a quick update.
Well, the US already has a whole range of tariffs in place against Chinese products and goods. And now an additional $18 billion worth of Chinese imports have been hit with substantial import duties. One that's grabbing much of the attention here is the new tariff on Chinese-made electric vehicles, which increases the duty from 25% to 100%. Lithium-ion batteries used in EVs are also affected, with tariffs rising from 7.5% to 25%. Other goods have been slapped with new tariffs as well, including medical-related items like syringes and needles, going from 0% to 50%, and PPE products up from 0 to 25%. Solar panels, cranes that are used at ports, steel, aluminium. It's an extensive list, and one the Biden administration says is necessary to protect the US economy, US manufacturing, and US jobs. Which, coming as it does less than 6 months before November's election, is a potential vote winner, especially for workers in those heartland swing states, working in manufacturing sectors that have been affected by cheaper Chinese products on the global marketplace. In announcing these tariffs, Washington has again hit out at what it considers to be unfair Chinese trade practices, such as oversupplying. But while these measures may help Biden at the ballot box, they're doing nothing to improve relations with Beijing. Washington had been trying to improve the relationship with China. Just last month, we saw President Biden and Xi Jinping speaking by phone to try and restore and build on those relations. These tariffs will undercut that plan, but will show that the US president is ready to protect US jobs while also standing up to China. Nick Harper, NDTV, Washington.
Switching tracks, Ashwin Ramaswami, the first Gen Z Indian American running for his US state legislature, has raised over $280K US, which is considered to be a substantial figure at the state level. Ramaswamy has outraised his incumbent opponent, Shawn Still, by 22 times in the latest filing period from the 1st of February to the 30th of April. Now, while Ashwin Ramaswamy has raised this whopping amount, his opponent has raised only $6,400 US. The two are running for the state Senate in the District 48 of Georgia. Here's a glimpse of Ashwin Ramaswamy's rise.
To be honest, I didn't expect to be here. A candidate for public office asking for your vote. If you haven't already noticed, I don't look like anyone else in the Georgia State Senate. But maybe that's a good thing.
This Gen Z Democrat quit his job protecting elections from hackers, and now he's targeting what he says is a greater threat to democracy, his state senator. 24-year-old Ashwin Ramaswamy is running for a Georgia State Senate seat, taking on a Republican Georgia State Senator Shawn Still, who was indicted alongside Trump in the state's election interference case.
I'm Ashwin Ramaswamy. I'm the son of immigrants. I'm an engineer. I'm Gen Z, and I was born and raised right here in Johns Creek. And I'm ready to get to work building the Georgia that could be the one just over the horizon.
Between 2010 and 2022, the population of Asians in the 48th Senate District jumped from 16% to 28%. Ashwin, a second-generation immigrant who grew up in a South Indian Tamil family, says he believes he can better represent his district's growing Asian population. Ramaswamy's campaign has raised $280,000 so far, including $50,000 from his own pocket. He is touting his youth, and computer science background as assets that would make him a unique member of the legislature. Ramaswamy, who will be the legally required age of 25 by November's general election, said he believes he'll be the youngest Indian American legislator in the United States. If elected, he would be the first Indian American state senator in District 48 of Georgia. He would also be the first Gen Z state senator in Georgia and the only Georgia state legislator with both a computer science and a law degree. Parmeshwar Bawa for NDTV. As always, news and updates continue. We're stepping into a very short break. Welcome back. In 2013, China militarized nearly 3,200 acres of land in the Indo-Pacific. China now has a plan for the Caribbean. So what exactly is China's Caribbean plan? Here's a detailed explainer for you.
In 2013, China militarized almost 3,200 acres of land in the Indo-Pacific. The Spratly Islands became the epicenter of China's Indo-Pacific game plan. 10 years later, China now has a plan for the Caribbean. So what exactly is China's Caribbean plan? Let's decode. China's strategy is on two fronts. Either it uses military, which is what it did in the Spratly Islands, where it militarized these 14-15 islands by reclaiming them. Or the other aspect of China's game plan is through an economic warfare that it unleashes on smaller countries, Djibouti being one of them. It now is heavily indebted due to China's grants and loans and is testimony to how China seizes a strategic location and then works backwards. The latest now is Antigua, just 200 miles outside of US Virgin Islands. That's where China is now pumping in billions of dollars in grants and loans. It's setting up an entire economic zone. Reports seem to suggest that China will even be issuing passports out of that entity and will decide who comes in, who stays there, and who isn't allowed. Of course, Chinese companies will have tariff-free access. The ultimate goal being that it will have a presence in America's backyard. So what it did with the Spratly Islands and the Indo-Pacific at large is what China wants to do at the other end of the world. Free and fair and open maritime lines is what the world is wanting to create. And that's exactly what China is trying to dominate, is trying to militarize, is trying to seize economic advantage of. So can America now afford to take a back seat? It did so when the Spratly Islands were being reclaimed. Barack Obama was the US president that time. He didn't act, despite many reports indicating that China had reclaimed thousands and thousands of acres of land. But can Joe Biden afford that luxury? Since then, the world has changed. There is greater clarity about how China wishes to dominate maritime lines. And it's not just about the Indo-Pacific anymore. There is Djibouti, there is Sri Lanka, there is Maldives, all the way to Solomon Islands, and now Caribbean Islands, right at America's doorstep. So will this start a larger push towards changing how Quad is meant to only tackle few aspects of economic maritime engagement? Or will this start a greater push to revamp Quad 2.0 and address the dragon that Chinese economic machinery is turning out to be? And what will that be? Will there be greater synergies between the four members? Will there be a reason to admit ASEAN countries, create an ASEAN Plus along with Quad? What will be the dimensions of how countries that plan to come together and challenge China's dominance in maritime domain? What will that strategy be? Antigua's domination by China will probably let the world to those answers.
Well, thank you for investing your time and watching this edition of The World 24/7. We'll keep tracking the latest developments for you. Do stay tuned.